Hi everyone, it's Anthony Fantano here with Drama Tuesday. And yeah, we're talking some drama. And who would it be between other than rapper, songwriter, singer, Six God, Mr. Drake, Champagne Poppy, and former rapper turned opinion podcast man himself, Joe Budden, who was absolutely positively going in on Drake during a recent podcast episode talking about his latest project for all the dogs.
I miss the Drake that was rapping for the rappers. I miss the Drake that when he dropped, the rappers hit him. Not these little fucking kids. I don't give a fuck about you and Kai Cenat. That's gonna sound like hate. Go find some niggas your fucking age.
Now, if you know anything about Joe Budden and his opinions on Drake and rap music generally, it shouldn't surprise you to hear that he didn't really like the project. You don't really have to be a music expert or a math genius to put two and two together here and figure out that like Joe Budden is not the key demographic for Drake's music, which is why the tone of Joe's critiques in this podcast were so confusing. I will get to that in a second. What I do want to mention before we get into that is that Joe's words have created quite the ruffle. The ruffle? Can you create a ruffle? His words have made waves. His words have ruffled some feathers among the Cash Money crew, among the OVO goons. Joe has Drake's dad posting to the internet, Birdman posting to the internet, and even Drake seemingly in his comments with a big, thick, paragraph-long roast talking about how Joe Budden essentially has failed at music. Both people here took their shots, they made their points, and I don't know if anyone walked away seriously wounded per se. It just kind of seems like Drake and Joe have generated more attention for each other at the end of the day. But to get to my own thoughts on this, the perspective of Joe's words on Drake currently just didn't really make sense to me, because if you know anything about Drake's artistic trajectory over the years and also his rise to popularity, you understand that when it comes to, rappers, guys who consider themselves to be macho, lyrical miracle types that bring the energy and the vibe and the pen game of a Joe Budden, for example, those types of dudes never really took Drake all that seriously, especially during the first portion of his career. In fact, Drake and Joe Budden have a years-long quiet beef going between each other at this point. Joe having negative things to say about Drake's music isn't exactly new, so the fact that he would portray that there was a time when Drake was rapping for rappers and, it was a rapper's rapper during Take Care or something, that just wasn't true. That was not true at all, in fact.
How many classic albums does Drake have?
I don't know if the public recognizes Take Care as a classic. I think that if not today, by 2020, we are going to recognize that album as a classic album. So far gone, Take Care.
Culturally during that time, that's when dudes like Joe Budden were hitting Drake the most with those Drake the type of dude type memes. The sort of jokes that you might catch on an old Big Ghost blog post that's, reviewing Nothing Was the Same or something like that. Drake's the type of guy that cries during romantic scenes in movies, or he uses this kind of lotion. So again, to put it bluntly, there's never been a point in Drake's career where he had uniform praise across all of hip-hop culture, and that especially goes for the type of guys who would most likely put Nas, Jay-Z, Joe Budden, or Eminem in their top 5. Now, I will say this, there was certainly a time in Drake's career where I think he was very unhappy with the fact that those kind of dudes didn't take him seriously, didn't see merit in what he did, or didn't think he should be allowed to be a part of hip hop or be, able to do what he was doing. He was a joke, he was soft, he just made rap for women. Yeah, at one point it did clearly hurt Drake that he wasn't being taken seriously by those types. However, he ended up reaching a point of popularity to where you couldn't ignore him and his numbers anymore. And these types of dudes, he essentially outlasted them, outcharted them, out-relevancied them, and now he's in a position where their opinion doesn't really matter anymore. There's nothing they can really do to Drake or say about Drake that can stop him at this point. And to hear Joe Budden at this point acting like, yeah, there was a time when he was rapping for real rap fans and so on and so forth, it's made up. So with that being said, let me pull apart the second piece of Joe's critique of Drake here, where he seems to be unhappy with the fact that Drake is collaborating with and associating with artists and creators and just basically people generally that are much younger than him. Joe Budden's generation of rap, you guys already rejected him. You threw him in the trash. Now that he's pushing 40, he's not going to suddenly turn around and start seeking validation from you guys, having outlasted you, having passed you out, despite all of your efforts to basically put out his flame when he was getting going. Of course, instead, Drake is going to spend time with and collaborate with the next generation of artists who he very obviously inspired. A lot of these younger dudes that Drake is associating with now, that Drake is collaborating with now, that he's hanging out with now, these are guys who are, artistically speaking, like his children. Drake set the tone aesthetically and musically in so many ways for this next generation of rap. And by collaborating with these artists who see him as an artistic god in that way, he's just feeding back into the same cycle. He's giving sauce back to a community who's going to hand it back to him at the end of the day. Love Drake's music or hate it, he kind of set the tone for a lot of what we hear today. And you can't really blame the guy for just kind of reaping the benefits of that by collaborating with artists who are directly inspired by him. Or indirectly inspired by him because they make more sense within a paradigm that he helped kind of set. And if Drake takes the artistic opinions of the next generation of music listeners and creators more seriously than you guys, it's most likely because they took him seriously first. I do want to jump in here and add one more thing because there is a development to this story. Apparently Drake DM'd Joe Budden and then Joe just like read the DMs on his show, which like, you don't just read the DMs. Bad form, Joe. Also, there's another thing I should lay 2 cents down on, and it's this question of Drake's maturity level and how that plays out in his music, which for sure is open for criticism, but I don't think it's something that Joe truly cares about or can really comment on. The era of hip-hop music that he tends to favor had quite a bit of its own share of immaturity in the music. Dude was signed by Eminem at one point, and I don't ever hear him out here complaining about how many fart, pee, or diarrhea jokes are on an Eminem record. While I agree Drake does have a bit of Peter Pan syndrome, he's far from the first or only rap artist in the industry to have it. And I think that's all I have to say. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up with a link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Drake, Joe Budden, forever.